Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to Leadership in the Age of AI. My name is Tracy McDonald, and I'm the Director of Custom Training with the Learning and Development Initiative, which lives within NJIT and NJII. So welcome. We are going to start today with just some very quick introductions, and I'm just going to follow all of you on my screen as I see you. And then from there, we're going to go into a conversation that I'm hopeful will be helpful for those who are here, whether you are in a leadership role or you are not, but looking to work with your leadership of your organization to understand what that means within this world of artificial intelligence being, at the ready and available for all and for also many applications. So let's see. Ifyak, would you like to go first?
Sure. Ifyak Yang, co-founder of First Street Partnerships, which is a AI consulting, training, and strategy firm. I'm also a sort of AI strategist at Microsoft. New York born and bred. Super excited about this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you. Jen?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jennifer D'Angelo, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of Healthcare at NJII. Really excited to be joined by my panelists this afternoon and kind of take a deeper dive into AI and how to use it efficiently and effectively, securely in the workplace. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thanks. Jeff?
Oh, good morning. So Jeff Garwood, basically a grateful NJIT Masters alum as well. It's been a while, but that was a big step. So thank you, NJIT, for that. Transitioning roles right now. So I was most recently a VP at Salesforce, where I led a team focused on platform data and AI, mostly in financial services and healthcare. And then recently I'm heading up the AI Factor Institute, which is executive-led training and strategy around AI based on the book The AI Factor by Professor Saxena, and looking forward to today's conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. So by way of why we're having this conversation today, I was thinking back to the 90s when the internet was first made widely available, email was relatively new, and the organization in which I worked was one where we just had our typical way of working. We used computers for simple, easy things, but there was not communication in the broader world back and forth. And I remember very clearly the president of our company saying, I don't understand this internet. I'm not getting email. I don't trust it. I don't know what to do with it. So sit tight, everybody, and just do your job. So eventually, obviously, we were pushed forward into this realm of using technology in a different way, using new technology. And so it all just reminded me that as a leader, if you're not an expert in an area, how do you know what to do? How do you know when to do it? How do you know how to do it? So you three are all leaders in different areas, right? Different industries. You have different skill sets. What do you feel are the greatest challenges that leaders face, at the aggregate 30,000, 50,000 foot level, as AI-based tools have become more mainstream?
You want me to jump in first?
Whoever wants to go first is welcome to. Go ahead,
Sure.
Jen,
So if I look at the healthcare space and some significant challenges, not only healthcare, government, and kind of the work that we do here, what comes top of mind for me, data security, privacy, and some accountability leveraging AI tools. So for me, my mind goes right to data and making sure we have guardrails in place. And we have sensitive information that's shared. There's personal information, there's medical information. So how do we leverage an AI tool effectively and securely with data privacy and security concerns in mind? So I feel that that's a big challenge. And also getting ahead of AI implementation within your organization. So having those discussions very openly with your team about AI tools, what tools are approved to be used in your workplace. So I feel like having transparent conversations with your team regarding AI-based tools and having a place where they can come and talk openly, freely about it, right? So, and how to best use it within your environment. So that comes top of mind for me.
So I could kind of riff on that a little bit. I think it's knowledge and comfort where you kind of started out, right? But I think risk is the number one thing. So once they're comfortable, putting it into business context, right, and stopping, I think on our prep, you mentioned that people are doing AI anyway outside of work. We need to bring it in, but that risk is very hard to quantify right now, right? There's really no guidelines or governance, or there's very loose frameworks to actually measure risk exposure. So that has made it difficult, particularly regulated industries, to find a way to adopt it. That said, I was thinking of an analogy this morning. Taking a shower is risky, right? But hopefully everybody actually takes showers, even though it's risky. So I think the goal is to look at the value versus the risk, and just at this point, take smaller steps, maybe start it in parts of the business where the risk exposure is lower, right? A lot of companies are doing things around call handling and answering, or developers. So some of those lower, might not be transformative or strategic, but getting comfortable with that and allow the organization to be able to develop an innate sense of the risk for the tools they're bringing in.
I think those are all spot on. I would take on the other side of it, there's an element of how do you, as a leader, I think there's a risk in not embracing AI in sort of a progressive, I think in an intentional way. Your analogy, Tracy, of I don't know what this internet thing is, I'm not going to embrace it. Like, you think about the ripple effects that is of people who are sort of willing to do it. Not only are your competition going to potentially get a leg up on you, but I think even your own employees are sort of seeing that lack of a growth mindset around AI can be really damaging. So I think it's a balancing act. Obviously, there is the risk and exposure that you need to sort of manage as a leader, but also how do you sort of create whether it's opportunities or forums, as mentioned earlier, to allow people to brainstorm out loud and think, how would AI work for us? How might we approach this? It's okay to crawl, walk, then run. But I think to just wait until you have everything figured out before you go out to people will probably be seen as, I think that's a risk of being seen as being behind the times, not embracing it. And then you create this shadow IT, which we've talked about earlier, where people are using it on the side, but they're not sure if they can include it. And then that's only like quantifies and magnifies risk.
Shadow IT. I like that phrase. And I think that the creating opportunities is such an important perspective, right? It's like Jeff said, you take what's the lowest risk area where you can start. That does create an opportunity, right? Where you can sort of dip your toe, try something on, see how it fits, and then grow from there. So to sort of piggyback on that, right? So here's a question that, I'm hoping will at least give some people, a bit of food for thought, right? So if you're gonna build an AI strategy, what does it look like? What's first, second, third? Where do you start? I threw a couple of ideas up there on the slide, but I'm not the expert in the field. So what are your thoughts?
I get to crack at it. I think, strategy is not changed, right? Strategy. It's got to really be tied to business, technical, or financial value in the company, right? So in a way, it's no different than what we had. It's just the unknowns of what it is are much harder to grasp, right? So couple parts, I would say. First is we've talked about people, and building that culture of AI is probably a huge part, right? Getting them foundationally sound and leveling everybody up to be able to use that is one part. And then a suggestion I have generally too is kind of that low risk thing I mentioned earlier. Every packaged product out there is dropping in AI. Major enterprise package you're using, even small packages, are wrapping AI into this thing, right? So if you're looking for ways to start to inject AI, really see if you can double down on the things you already own, or tools that might already bring some of that in, because likely they're doing more to control data access and all the kind of hallucinations and things to bound that at least a little bit. So I think it's a strategy, people first, and then looking at that. One more quick point. So another part of strategy too is, since the tools are changing so crazy fast, right? Kind of what Ifiak said, you got to get started somewhere, get started. If you wait for things to level out, it's not going to, right? This is going to be going for a while. So I'd say look at capabilities you need more than tools first. Pick a tool that fits you best and keep an eye out, because they're all there's a lot of equivalency as they're all leapfrogging each other. So kind of be flexible, but look at a capability view versus kind of what's the tool for that, right? Might be a good place to at least start framing things.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned leveraging the current systems in your work environment, right? So applications that you're using in your day-to-day workforce likely have AI components that are being baked into those solutions and coming out very quickly with updates to accommodate AI utilization throughout the workplace. So I think definitely leveraging that and the tools that are inherently available, that definitely helps with minimizing risk and safeguarding your data and compliance. So looking at that as you're additionally then establishing your governance and compliance standards around AI use and utilization. I think that's really important, but certainly looking at current landscape and infrastructure, and really, what are your goals? What's your mission, vision? What are you looking to accomplish with AI? Is what you are looking to accomplish feasible? Is it the hype of AI, or what's the reality for you within your organization and within your work group? What's the feasibility of leveraging AI, and how is it going to help your organization become more efficient? Certain areas, that's a no-brainer. So if you're looking to build some strategies and efficiencies around even generating job descriptions, something that's could be a laborious task, but we can generate job descriptions, tailor it to your company's specific needs, versus looking at bundling an AI analytic and functionality to wrap around revenue cycle management or something like that. So I think tools are evolving quickly and being baked into current solutions within the workforce.
Yeah, I think the spot on. Everyone, it's the gold rush right now. So people who've been, if you touch data, you're rebranding to say you're involving AI now, right? You'd be a fool not to. And so there's definitely a pathway where you get no new tool. You just sort of double down on your existing, software stack and sort of use new updates as they come along. I think in terms of a strategy, the only thing I would add is, there is how do I empower my employees to be more AI ready, compliant, enabled, and as well as, are there particular parts of my business that I want to sort of focus AI because they lend themselves to be more sort of able to be impacted in a positive way from AI transformation, right? And so it's twofold. I think there is, I think what's been stated, what Jen mentioned too, of are there particular, do you want to go on a revenue standpoint? Are you thinking about cost deflection in terms of hey, AI can sort of help me save costs, or AI can sort of help increase revenue? Those are all sort of valid conversations that should happen. But I just would hate for people to lose track of there's also something to be said about how do you make sure your employees are coming along the journey as well, so that you're not building something in isolation and saying, okay, great, we've got this new process or this new tool in this particular area, it's AI ready, and people are they don't have what they need to be able to sort of tap into these pipelines that you're building.
Yeah, I think that level of transparency with your team, I think back to the first question of what's a challenge that leaders have, is that level of transparency and conversation around AI, that it's not that's not viewed as negative in the workplace or reducing headcount because we're implementing tools for efficiency purposes, but rather enhancing what our teams are able to produce, and in the time frame, in a faster time frame. So I think investing in your team and that talent and development, but also looking at the change management piece of that, and how does it really affect them in their day-to-day work, to to come alongside them, to support, not to replace. So I think there's that little bit of negative stigma of, AI is going to solve everything, so we don't need people to actually look at that. Well, AI is as good as the people using it, right? And the information that you're putting into the AI model.
These are all amazing thoughts and answers. Thank you all very, very much. I think my favorite phrase is double down on your software stack. That feels like a level of technical speak. These are words that I don't use every day. And Jen, you touched on the change management and preparing staff. And I think I've heard little bits from just about all of you on that. And we're going to get to that because that's an important part, right? You've got your early adopters, and then you've got your people who are really used to doing things the way that they've been done in the past. But before we get there, so, here's the big question, right? So I'm a leader in whatever, a department, a company, whatever it is. Do I have to be an expert in AI? Do I have to be a computer scientist? Do I have to be a data scientist? Do I have to know how to build this or not? What are your thoughts? What have your experiences been in this space, right? From a leader's perspective, do leaders need to be experts?
I can take a crack at it. So I would say no, with a qualified no, right? So my experience, I lead very technical teams typically, and some of them know way more than I know, right? They know way in depth. But as leaderships, it's up to us to have a clear understanding of the capabilities that are emerging, the future directions it's going, our business and potential areas that we could align it to, and pave a path for that evolution to happen, right? So bringing the staff up to date, looking at the tool, looking at the change management, looking at the measuring, looking at all kind of the managerial things, framework we need to put in place to both put it in place and measure the effectiveness so we can invest back into it, right? So at some point we have to have some kind of way. So yes, there's going to be a disruption in the middle where people are like going from word perfect to word way back, right? You're gonna be off for a little bit, but then it'll accelerate. So how do you put it in a path to do all that? But I think the main thing is, like a lot of us have said, the first starting point today is having a path to have them get comfortable with this in work, right? If we don't do it, they're going to be doing it anyway. I know in the prep we said that a couple times, is that they're doing this anyway, right? We need to give them a place inside of work where they're able to do it effectively within our bounds. So yeah, so the short answer, no, but long answer, we have to chart the course to guide them through it.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I don't know how we can ever become the master and expert of AI, but certainly knowing enough of the foundational capabilities and limitations, implications, and just knowing our business well enough that we can look at each area of our business. And in some areas it makes sense, right, to leverage AI and some solutioning, and some areas it might not make sense. So having those conversations and meeting with your team to kind of unpack that a little bit. What does it look like for adoption within your organization? And how do you really document those efficiencies? And be able to share your story of best practices, right? So early adopters are kind of paving the way with certain initiatives, or they're trying to solve for a specific industry problem. So I think sharing those success stories and some obstacles along the way, some best practices. So I think, just having that open dialogue and being able to share and communicate with others of what works well and what areas you need to maybe pay a little bit more attention to, so that it's not felt like it's a free for all either. So it's controlled within your organization.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that you don't need to be an expert, but I think you do need to sort of coach, model, and care. What does it mean to be sort of AI forward? This growth mindset about sort of AI in your business. There's a world which, I think you're seeing it like a parallel is you're seeing it in like the education space, right? Where take a university. Some are saying, like, some professors are in the, if I see it, I'm policing it, and and then others are like embracing it, right? And so that disconnect can happen unless leadership is clear on, we may not know the answers on this tool will be the winner right now. That's hard because we're early days. But the idea of, hey, we're either going to bring a group of people together to try to focus on this, be patient with us, we're coming, or we're going to start here and see what makes sense before we expand. We're going to do pilots, we're going to do whatever. Here's an opportunity to talk about it. It's just like modeling that, hey, we're trying to lean in and embrace it while as we figure out what this looks like. I think is really important. I think that's more important now than one person being an expert in one particular part or particular LLM or one particular software, since to from that we mentioned earlier, things are evolving really quickly, and so that's less important, I would say, as an expert, to be an expert right now.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned university protocols too. So universities that are taking the approach of policing it as opposed to embracing it and educating on how to properly use it, right? So it kind of puts industry, it forces industry to make quick decisions around adoption of AI and what their positioning is, sometimes faster than we can really identify challenges, obstacles, or appropriateness for a particular use case. So I like how you highlighted that, because I feel like industries were forced very quickly to make a decision on their positioning of leveraging AI tools within their organization, university, and so forth. So it's been interesting to see different positions and perspectives on how that's been implemented.
So it's based on everything that you've all said, and I'm going to go off slides here for a second. What happens if you try a tool and it doesn't work, right? So in the world of design thinking and failing forward, right? How much room as people are forced to build out these strategies and really not be left behind, how much room is there for experimentation and learning from our mistakes?
I would say there's a lot of room, mainly because right now we're beginning to see the initial use cases of successful sort of Gen AI deployments, and what does that look like? And for the most part, people are taking a pilot style approach. And so even I think as the tools and software sort of evolves, I think companies are also understanding, like, are there red lines in which we are sort of like, hey, that's a line of like, we can't cross that. That's a non-starter for us. So people are sort of learning that in real time. And we've mentioned things like governance and data security. And so those might be things that as you play around with stuff, you realize, hey, I might like how this tool, the user interface works. I think it's really simple. It makes a lot of sense. But man, I've got some real concerns about how some of my data and words going. And so that might be a reason to sort of pivot and start over. And I think the idea of really, I think kind of a takeaway message that I think is coming out pretty clear from so far from this conversation is the importance to try stuff. You don't have to, that doesn't mean you dump all of your proprietary company, customer data in and you start playing around with there. Like you can make an environment that doesn't have anything that, like, if it got lost, it wouldn't be a big deal. It's sort of made up data, but just to sort of see how things like work and interact. I think that's most important. And if you fail there, okay, great. Then, you learn your lessons and you'll further refine and you'll be better informed of, like, hey, moving forward, these are requirements that we had that maybe we didn't know the first time.
And that was very well said. It was just, while you're talking, I was thinking, like, is AI magic? Is AI going to just solve implementation problems that every other traditional thing? How many projects fail, right? So I think the idea is that with the added risk, it's bounding where the potential impact could be, or again, leveraging vendors that are leaning a little farther into it, that might have a bit of a more stability to them to start, and do some strategic bets, right? Place some place some little bit out there. So a little bit of operational stuff to, do maybe some developer efficiency, some operational efficiency, and then maybe a little bit of strategic bet out there, right? But yeah, is AI going to like magically solve project implementation? No, you still have to do all the things you otherwise would have done. Good solid controls, change management, implementation guidelines, good software, change methodology for what the application's doing, monitoring, governing. None of that's really changed. What's changed is it's a little harder to see, some of with the other system, usually it's yes or no, it's broke or it's not, right? This has gotten much more subtle in where things do break down, right? Because it's generative and it's changing and it's giving you different answers each time, typically, right? If you're going on it. So, we're gaining from that creativity, but it's also making it trickier. So, but that said, everything we ever did still counts, right? It just gets, we have to double focus a little differently with the AI side.
That's such an important message, which is a really good segue into our next question, which is, in a different sense, right? Somebody on your team says, hey, can we try, I don't know, Google versus Microsoft, right? And it's a conversation, but these are tools that are out there. And without the fear of breaking something, right? So if employees are interested in adopting AI technologies as leaders, as strategists, how would you want them to present that to you? So for people, in this event who want to help push forward, right, and start that experimentation and let's try this on and see how it fits, how would you want them to put something together to make that argument?
That's, I think, having an open door relationship with your employees so that they feel comfortable enough to present an idea for a potential use case, knowing, some of the tools that you have in-house and some tools that they're using outside of the workplace, right? And getting that sense of comparison too. So professional versus personal use of AI tools, that differs. So really fostering that environment where your staff feel comfortable to come and have those conversations. And it really should be across the board, not really focused just on AI, but any strategic initiative that could help your organization, continuing to foster that bi-directional dialogue with your staff where they feel comfortable enough to approach just about anything that could help efficiencies within the workplace, leveraging different tools that might be available, that they've tested, tried, and having those healthy conversations, I think is helping promote that trust within your team.
I would just add that this is an opportunity, I think, for leaders to maybe come up with, are there 4 or 5 sort of things that people would need to sort of help solve for as they make their pitch, right? And even building this process for, because the tools will be out there. People will have their own individual sort of, hey, I think this is a use case that we could use this for, right? And so just lean into it. Because, okay, here's a process, whether it's a form that you can fill out, but these are like, I need these 4 or 5 sort of areas to be covered. What's the use case? How do you plan on using it? What are you using now? And basically, what do you think the positive output might be? Any concerns that you'd be aware of, that we should be aware of, think through, and just start compiling that, right? And I don't think this is, depending on the size of the organization, this doesn't necessarily have to be like a completely sort of C-suite top-down thing. You can do something where, hey, I want to intentionally empower some of my, business unit leaders to be able to sort of do this. What makes the most sense for marketing, and have the marketing department sort of do what makes sense for them, which might be different than engineering if you have coding or something like that, which might be different from someone else. And organically, I think you can get a better sense from there. And then, you're failing forward for a little bit. And then I think from there you can understand, okay, as a company, these are some lessons we've learned. Maybe we might want to approach it this way, put these particular guide rails in. But in that example, people are empowered because they feel like, okay, leadership is at least giving us an opportunity to make the case and try to see what makes the most sense for us.
Yeah, you definitely want to encourage your team to participate and give you that feedback, as opposed to using tools because they're afraid to say something that you're not aware that they're using. So I think one of the things that, one of the challenges that we'll all face is making sure you're controlling that environment within the workplace and your organization, and that staff are aware that using personal tools for business purposes, there's a line between those two scenarios, right? And having your staff feel comfortable enough to come to you. And nothing's perfect, right? We roll out and implement systems and change control and processes and tweak them. This is no different. So I think sometimes if staff see that there could potentially be an issue, that they may not say anything because they're afraid, number one, if they put information into it, what happened, and for fear of maybe losing the ability to leverage an AI tool that's maybe not approved. So
Agreed. So all very valid and all very logical. So I'm going to take the other side for a second. Change is really hard and people push back, right? Mm-hmm. So Kahneman and Tversky proved that people are more afraid of a loss than they are of a gain, right? So you think logic will work sometimes, sometimes it doesn't. So there's a lot of strategies on how to do. We talked about pilots and things like that. There's a book I love called The Human Element: Overcoming the Resistance to Change. Basically talks about how do you recognize that people have inherent fears of change and a fear of resistance. Mm-hmm. And how can you take those down slowly and work alongside that, not up against it, right? So my first list was, just take us some notes prior, this was a lot of logical things too, right? But at the end of the day, there's also that side, right? This is scary for some people, and we talked about scary for employees, scary for lack of control, lack of insight, just new costs, new this, new everything. So how do you show them slowly that the risk is low enough and the value, slowly show them the value we can drive from this, and the improvements is more than the loss, right? It's got to be 1.5x than what the cost of changing, right?
Right.
It's not a 1-for-1. So there is that, right? Just know that sometimes change takes work, and believing in it is the number one step, right? You have to decide that it's something you want to invest in, and that you really see the potential both for your career and for the company, right? So,
So that was great, because that was just a natural evolution right into my next question, which also matches one of the questions that came from our audience, right? So what considerations should we be considering with employees who might be resistant, right? There's and I think that this is a very emotional thing, right? Unless we choose to make a change ourselves, it's very difficult when a change is forced upon us, right? There's the learning curve. There's I have to learn this, but I also have to do my job, right? And there's pressure to do, and I've been doing my job a certain way for so long, right? And now you're asking me to do my job a different way. And it's even going back to the example of what had me wanting to do this webinar. Eventually, our corporate office said, we're going to start using this internet thing. And there's now a portal where you have to place your orders, right? We were sign and manufacturing trade show exhibits. So we were forced into being hooked up to America Online, and using that, and then getting into the company system to place those orders. And it changed the way that everybody worked. But it didn't change the human part of how we engaged with customers. It didn't change the human part of, okay, I've got this rush, and it didn't change, right? So the human part still remained the same. And I've heard all three of you say that in different ways and in different sentences. And, to Ifiak's point earlier of, is this magic? No, it's not magic, right? But it can be helpful and it can be useful. So the human part of, being a leader, right? Jen, you have an open door policy, right? Leaders need to step back and listen, right, and ask those questions. And I think also for those of us who are not in the leadership position, if we do want to advocate for a tool, okay, so how do we do this appropriately, professionally, putting an argument together and, being connected in a way to our work where, we want to really try to talk somebody into letting us try something. And then also being able to respect personal tools in a work environment, we have to be careful, right? Every company has sensitive information. So I really appreciated hearing the human side, right? And this goes back to the very popular book from the 90s, Who Moved My Cheese? And that's, to me, that's what this really boils down to, right? Is we're making change and our cheese is being moved. And so with that, is there anything that anybody would want to add to the question of what considerations should be kept in mind for those people who might be resistant to the change? Anything, that you would want to add to that? There was a good introduction, but
I would just add that as leaders, I think it's really important to know that like some of the concerns are valid, right? The level in which how quickly it's going to change could be debated, but you start looking about what's the return on investment for a lot of the AI spend. A lot of it is, well, if it took me 10 people to do that, if I can bring that down to 8 people, that's an ROI on my investment. And so the concern that people may have of whether it's job elimination or my job will be fundamentally different, I think it would be foolish to just dismiss it offhand, because I think there's value in that. And I think acknowledging that, hey, everyone's going to have to be able to do more and do your jobs differently, but then really being able to, how do you there's work to inspire. I think there's an opportunity to really inspire people to think of, hey, AI can do a lot of the drudgery, redundant stuff that no one really like to do and give us this efficiency. And so as you want to point to the upside of what we can get, I think that's definitely the way to go about it. But you have to sort of acknowledge that, there's going to be some change and there's going to be some growing pains. And just like these online portals, for all the for all the positiveness that came with that, as opposed to handwriting things and maybe mailing it or faxing or whatever you're doing beforehand, there were also sort of bumps in that. Well, what happens when the screen times out, or there's errors in there, and we take screen validations for granted now. But I remember the frustration of, I can't go past this page. I don't know why. And it's because you weren't doing something particularly right? And then people abandoning the process, that equivalent. You didn't fill out all the red forms or red text on a website that we now know and expect is oh, that's how I know I'm not doing something right. That isn't necessarily in place for AI. And so people are going to run up into things where it's not working the way they want to, or it's an extra step they consider. And there's no validation telling them that, oh, this is what you're messing up on. And so as you go through that learning process, being able to just empathize with folks, I understand that this is going to be tough, but we're going to be better off in the long run if we stay on this path.
Agreed. And then I'd say, kind of doubling down on it, if you say the why, not just the what, right? Why do we need to make this change? Competitive imperative. It's, other companies are doing this, and if we want to preserve our place and be able to pay out bonuses, we need to move too, right? There's that. The other thing is, because this is requiring a new way to think often, right? It is a big change. It's not like just another way to push a button. They have to learn to actually think differently to interact with these systems sometimes. So I did write a Medium article about change propagation in an organization, how it starts at the top, and by the time it gets to the bottom, they have months and years to think about it. And then by the time it gets to the change at the bottom, people have 3 days, right? Here's a new system, get used to it, right? So the more we can actually put buffer in, knowing it's going to be harder to figure your way through these forms. It's going to take a little while to readjust. So either you're going to cause a huge amount of stress while people are trying to do it the old way and the new way, or you do plan in some buffer of people, time, capacity, whatever it is, during that transition period. Otherwise, you're just going to power through it, and people are actually going to push back more because it's going to stress them double trying to do it the way I was and the way I am, right? So
Mhm.
you got a choice. So that would be my kind of big view there.
I think it's the same of all technology solution implementations, right? There's just that period where there's a lot of emotion. People are hesitant to change. They don't really know the value behind change. So, if I put my CIO hat on when I was working in the hospital, implementing an electronic health record, people look at you and say, "Oh, I'd love to just write this down. It's so much easier to do it my way." And look at bigger picture. Like, we're implementing these systems across the board to reduce redundant tasks by people. And so really looking at the downstream benefit of that. So all of these technology efficiency solutions are meant to help a process and to be more efficient with our time, minimize risk and duplication of effort. So to me, it's managing emotions, changing the way people work just with AI, but it's really just technology at large, right? Because we're implementing solutions to do so many different things as part of our organizational practices and, in our industry practice.
Yeah, I mean, these are all tremendous considerations. And this is where, open dialogue is going to be super important, right? Because sometimes when you get the context of something from someone else's perspective, it just totally changes, the way that we can understand something and allows for empathy. I thought that was a great word. So to continue on with some of our audience questions. So one is, my organization is excited to lean into AI, but how can we prevent the issue of stovepiped solutions, multiple AI tools for multiple different things, etc.?
I can take a crack at that. So again, it's not much different than it was before AI, right? In an organization, you're either going to have a particular niche need that only a niche set of vendors is going to fill, or you're trying to take more of a platform integrated approach, right? So, and it might be both, right? There might be parts of your business right now that if you're going to use AI, it is a niche, legal practice solution that's only this big, right? It might not be as integrated in or as open. So it always comes down to, just like it does today, right? Is the value of that unique niche product enough that it's worth being kind of boxed in and maybe not as open, or the data's not as accessible, or the APIs aren't as accessible? Or do you take more of a broad approach and then fill those gaps with the absolute minimum of niche solutions you have to do, right? But either way, you want to make sure they're open as best you can, that there's, an API open-centric world today, right? Most everything is fairly open. Not every healthcare system, back EHR is, right? Certainly. So you're always making trade-offs, right? So value versus openness. Yeah, I'll stop there.
But I think that leads back to your earlier point when you mentioned, the tools and systems that you already have in place, say for contract review, likely that application is embedding AI functionality within its system. So again, looking at your current organization's workflow and systems that you already have in place, what AI solutions are they baking into their systems to have that added functionality?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I think in some ways the conversation people can sort of think that AI has arrived. We think about like the internet, and we think of the internet now, but the internet has gone through multiple stages. And so we're all using the worst version of AI currently that it's going to be. And so this idea of like the stovepipe, that's a concern, but I think the earliest implementations are going to be things you already use. And so if you were stovepipe right now, that's probably going to be how you develop, at least initially, until the dynamic changes. And, we talk about, this idea of sort of agents and, AI sort of working on your behalf, and the ability to talk to other AI tools without you having to be in the loop completely all the time, which could potentially sort of shift it, where make a bigger difference. And we, that's a conversation for, I'm sure, a 400 level deep dive course that we can definitely get into. But I would say initially the I would be less concerned about developing solutions in silos, since people will find AI value, at least initially, on things they already work that's sort of closest to them, and that's going to probably be in silos right now. And you don't have to like do the full AI digital transformation for your organization all at once. Like, give it time, do it in piecemeal, when you're ready for it.
All very, very good advice. And I like the idea of piecemeal. Just start somewhere, right? So another question: AI is a great tool for automation and efficiency, but should innovators or implementers be concerned with its uses and guidelines? So I feel like that speaks to security a little bit, and appropriate, like having the right tool for the right use. But what do you all think?
I think it's more transparency, if I could take a first cut with it, right? So it's going to be hard to say uses and guidelines maybe, but I think transparency as best we can, and this is the tricky part again, it's very hard right now, right? What is the training based on? Is it auditable? Is it monitorable? Is it, does it have a thing to try to take out bias and toxicity? Does it, so how transparent is the solution? As much as its intended use, right? So, and this is the tricky part. It's very hard. LLMs are a little opaque by nature, right? But this is where we're getting better at it over time. But I think too, that just like OpenAI and the rest are putting,
Right,
as best they can, some guides, governance around what it can or can be used for. So yeah, I think there is a bit of that, but that's going to be an arms race for a good while, I think, too.
All right. So given our time, what I would like to do is any closing remarks from each of you, and while you are all offering some of your final thoughts, one of the things that I do want to make sure that people are aware of is that today's conversation was intended to be a starting point. So a whole bunch of, ideas, thoughts, perceptions, experiences, things like that. And having a conversation is a phenomenal place to start. Getting your hands dirty, getting involved in actually seeing what some of these things could look like, I believe would help both leaders and non-leaders to figure out where to from here. So while our panelists are giving their closing remarks, I will show that we do have some workshops coming up all this month. IFIOC is actually leading some of them. So just, if you want to learn more, get a better idea of, okay, how do I try this on and see how it fits? These are some things that are coming up for us through the LDI in November. And in the meantime, if you all want to give just some closing thoughts, what can people take away after today?
sure. I'll start us off. So I think just having open dialogue and building that network of camaraderie and just discussion about AI in your organization, in your industry, I think is a great starting point. Talking about it with your staff and your team, promoting innovative thinking and efficiencies within your organization, and not being afraid to take a chance and trial something, looking at use cases. Are they successful, not successful? And sharing your story with others, I think, is really important. So we all come from different industries and backgrounds, but I think having these informal discussions around AI use cases and risks associated really is healthy discussion in a rapidly changing environment. So I think that this was great. So thank you.
Or you want me to go? Okay. All right. So I would just say it's very exciting times, right? If you think back to what we went through with the internet, we're in as much in the dark today of what it's going to be and what it can be. So none of us have it figured out, right? So the beauty of it is all of us get the opportunity to lean into it experiment with it, and it can do way more than even you think or I think it can do. None of us have it figured out. So my advice is just try a whole slew of things and push the boundaries. My best advice is, talk to it like a lot more. Start using the voice mode, and I literally go to customers. I'm chatting to ChatGPT on the way, asking about their competitors and this, right? Just the more immersed you get in it, the better off you'll be comfortable with it, and then you'll start realizing the opportunities. And again, I'll double down on something Ifyak said. There's no right time, right? It might be the worst we ever have, but there's no right moment, right? The right moment to actually start is like yesterday or today, right?
Right.
So just getting started. That's what I say, my last line. My hardest part of that's a line to the kids. The hardest part of getting started is getting started. So just get started, right? Get used to it, get comfortable, and as the tools mature, we're going to find that basically these things are going to evolve very quickly. They're going to converge, so you're not making a bad bet necessarily. You're getting used to the capabilities and figure out how to fit your business. So.
Well said. I think the only thing I would add is now is the time to sort of embrace this era that we're in. This AI has sort of taken over as, it is I do believe it is a like monumental paradigm shift in terms of that will impact what we do, how we work, how we communicate. We don't necessarily know where exactly the trajectory is going to go, but it feels like when the internet was created, some will say it's when steam engines were like the printing press, these like monumental changes, and that could be daunting and feel like, man, I don't know how to put my hands around something that big. But to the points that have been mentioned earlier, start somewhere, right? Start small, have conversations, and I think as leaders, one of the easiest things you can do is model the idea that as a company, we are going to do our part to start embracing it, right? Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised the amount of innovation and solutions that your employees will have. There's a lot of resources just on NJII and LDI that you can sort of look to like get more knowledgeable, but starting somewhere would be really important. And then just have a willingness, a growth mindset to embrace it and pivot if necessary, and that's perfectly fine.
I think a last word I'll say is just have fun with it too, right? It is a tool that can be fun to use. So really embracing it, having fun with it. Do a fun AI icebreaker with your team to show a different side of it and utilization for it. So I think that could help too.
Great advice from everybody. Awesome thoughts. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. I really, really, really appreciate your time from prepping to today and just being here and for answering the questions from our audience as well as my questions. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your day.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you all. It was awesome.